So I have a story to tell you, but before we get there, I'm going to say this. A lot of us study the blues and we learn how the blues works. We learn what it's made of, our responsibility as guitar players, and pretty much the map on the guitar neck. And if you're studying the blues and you're playing, you might find yourself in a rut. And these are some ideas to help you break out of a normal blues rut when you're learning the blues. My channel is littered with tons of, in my opinion, great blues videos. They'll be listed below, some playlists, some standalone videos. I'll be mentioning those concepts in the video, but this lesson is about the people who study the blues, who have the ideas, but for some reason they just feel like they're doing the same things, they can understand what they're doing, they don't hear the magic yet, and we're going to get you there. So the way that this video came about is actually, here's story time. 4 years ago, I was contacted by someone who wanted to buy some guitar lessons for someone else, and I honored it and we did it. And they had just contacted me 4 years later. Hello, David. And David actually came to the studio and we talked about guitar. And his question really was, he has been studying the blues for a while and he felt like he was in a rut. And when I teach lessons personally, I make a YouTube video recap for every student. We have the lesson, and then at the end of it, I usually make a video that I send to them so that they can, have the ideas fresh in their mind and understand what to study. So he came 4 years after he got the gift certificate, and it was a great question, and I figured let's turn his review video into a YouTube video because his questions were real questions, and I'm sure that some of you have them. So in the rapid recap, what we're going to look at is this. We are going to look at taking your eyes out, limiting your root choice, holding notes, using different rhythms, crossbar soloing by not hitting roots, and dynamics. We might touch upon some other stuff here, but these are the main things we focused on to help David and maybe your journey in getting what you want out of the blues. Because you know what to do, but we have to kind of like learn how to do it. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to say hi to David one more time. David, sat down and he's like, listen, I feel like my phrasing is short. I feel like I'm repeating the same things. I want to learn how to break out of it. And we'll start with this, is no matter what right now, when you're learning the blues, learning guitar, you are the magician and you know how the tricks are done. It's very hard for you to hear how good you are because you are concentrating on putting the pieces together. And when he played in front of me, he was a lot better than he gave himself credit for. Okay, so David, you are a lot better than you gave yourself credit for, but I understand the mentality. And so the first thing we did was taking David's eyes, or taking your eyes out of the game. So what we're going to use here is we're going to use it was an A blues. We're going to, for this, use the 4-1 A minor pentatonic. This is it. If you want to make it a blues scale, if you want to make it the full Mixodorian, that video popping up here, anything it will work with, okay? So let's just keep it simple right now. What David found himself doing was staring at the guitar neck to confirm his position. And when you use your eyes to confirm, to look at the guitar neck, a couple things happen. Number one, we delay our action because our eyes have to give us feedback. Number two, our eyes are used to seeing the structure in a very similar way. We see it the same. We understand how this thing is built. And if we take our eyes out of the soloing right now, what happens is when you put your finger down, all of a sudden your mind's eye has to kind of like light up, and really you're taking this tactile approach, like you're here, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I know there's a finger here by proximity, and there's one here and here, and you got to kind of feel your way around the scale. And what this does is two things: takes that time for your eyes to commit to what's going on out, and also it creates a better conversation because when you come from the note that you're already on, there's a sense of familiarity. And we tend to kind of stop on a note, then start where we want. And so this is what it sounds like when we take our eyes out of the game, or practice taking our eyes out of the game and letting our fingers kind of dance around the paths that we know. Here's a blues backing track in A. I will solo. I'm not going to look, but I'm going to string together the notes with like thinking about the scale and then letting my fingers kind of like, put together the puzzle. Here we go. gentle solo, but what you should have noticed is that every line ended and the next line came from either the where I ended or someplace very close. That is like the language of music. You don't want to, he laughed at this, I was telling him, you don't want to sound like how Dave Matthews sings. I mentioned this in the video a long time ago, you know, you don't want to play the guitar like, and if you're looking at it with your eyes, you might be like, oh, this is a cool line. And then I can see the pentatonic here and, you know, play something lower and have it sound disjointed. So that is the first thing we're talking about, taking our eyes out of the game. The second thing I told David to focus on is to limit what notes you're hitting on those chord changes. Now, if you're new to the blues, this might, you know, be a big revelation, but if you've been watching the channel, you know about this. The blues is made of 1s, 4s, and 5s, and in this pentatonic are 1s, 4s, and 5s, and 1s, and 4s, and 5s, and 1s. And if we see all those 1s, 4s, and 5s at the same time, it kind of gives us too big of a playing field, and we try to fill up our playing field with a lot of notes because we want to get to everything that we can see. But what you want to try doing is selecting 1, 1, 1, 4, and 1, 5 to practice with. Here's 1, 4, and 5. And only hit those 1s, 4s, and 5s when the 1 chord changes, when the 4 chord changes, when the 5 chord changes. And what this does is it doesn't let you get too far away. So when I'm on the 1, I know I have to come back to the 1. So I kind of circle it, okay? I don't go too far, I don't get lost. I have to work at putting less notes in, but with more, you know, ideas. So, you know, I'm not going and kind of like running off with a run-on sentence. And so when the 4 comes, I'm going to hit this 4, right? But I'm gonna focus on coming back to that 4. I'm not going to, you know, hit this other 4. And when the 5 comes, I'm going to hit this 5. This gives me a couple like little tiny sets of strings to work with, and by limiting the amount of strings we're using and by limiting our root note, you know, choice as we hit those chords, it really makes us think about what we're doing and puts the pressure on us to do things differently in a smaller amount of space. So let's see if we can hear what that sounds like. Here we go. So I don't know if you saw, my eyes were closed. I was really focusing on just that 1, just that 4, just that 5. That helps keep the runaway train from running away, and it makes you play more with less geographical area, if that makes sense. All right, let's get on to our next little tip. One thing that you might find is that when you're playing, we want to put a lot of notes in, and I kind of have been addressing that in the past 2 ideas, but to prevent that, we want to be very, very conscious, and we want to learn how to hold your notes more. Now, holding notes is hard if you don't have, you know, your volume up a little and a pedal that can sustain your notes, but you still want to try, all right? When you consciously hold your notes, you're going to be holding yourself back from putting more notes in, but the listener hears that hold and it adds emotion. I have a video on, you know, playing with soul, and really bending and holding notes is a part of soulful playing. It's not about putting more notes in, it's about holding stuff. So a quick idea to do, again, if you know your map, we're talking about like you know what to do, and again, if you don't, check out the playlist below. This is about the human element of playing, the things that, you know, you can't really map out, the stuff that you have to feel. And so, you know, common notes to hold are the 4 bent to the 5, not like that, there we go, the flat 7 to the 1. I'm just going to concentrate on those, all right? So those 2, and you almost want to do it to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable to do, it just doesn't sound right, but it sounds right. Let's see what we got. simple enough. That takes a lot of willpower. Again, some people might be rolling their eyes, but this is just an idea of what to do when you know the map, when you know what scales to use. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Let's keep going to our next tip. Next tip is like the obvious thing that you want to look at, which is using different rhythms. And where does that come from? Well, it can come from your picking hand, and it can come from hammer-ons and pull-offs. You know, so the idea here is if you play something, all right, and you're in your like your brain space where you keep on like repeating, like, you know, the same thing. If you are conscious that you're about to repeat the same thing and you go, oh, I can sense it's coming, try to really change it up with rhythms with the picking hand or your fretting hand. And so when you're changing rhythms, really it comes down to if you feel like you're about to repeat the same old, all right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a lot of repetition, and you're going to kind of have to listen for it, where I'm going to play something. Now the second part, I'm going to pretend I was about to you know, repeat myself, but I consciously try to give it a different rhythm. So let's see what it sounds like. So hopefully you caught those little tiny movements where I played one phrase and the second phrase was pretty much the same footprint, but with different rhythms. This is one of the hardest things to do because learning about rhythms and the physicality of it is hard, but I'll give you a little tip. The best rhythms to improvise with in the blues are swing eighths, 1, a 2, a 3, a 4. Those are dotted eighth notes, and triplets, triplet, 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 triplet. All right, so if you get into a rut and you're okay, just try a different rhythm. Okay, let's get on to our next tip. Our next tip actually came as a question from David, which is, my phrasing is built around the bars, which means, you have, the first 4 bars are 1, 1, da 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 1, as in the interval you're playing, and a lot of the phrasing, that was me focusing around the 1. And how do we kind of like solo over the bar so we're not always just mindfully playing these chunks? And the idea here, as simple as enough as it sounds, it's kind of weird, is you just don't want to emphasize the chord tone or the root note of the chord you're on. So what I mean by this is, when I'm on the 1, I know where my 1s are. And my resolve for the phrasing usually sounds like this. I'll show you. I'm going to play 4 bars of the 1, and I'm going to show you like the short phrasing mentality where I'm kind of like ending on these 1s when the bars end. Here we go. Alright, so everything right there kind of like ended on the 1. How do we avoid that? Well, we don't emphasize the 1. We just keep on playing. You can tag a 1. You could... There's the 1 there. But don't stop on it. Don't... Just keep going. And don't hit a 1 until you've played over bar 1, bar 2, and maybe bar 3, so you get these longer messages, these longer conversations. So let's see what it sounds like. So there, I played the 1 at the beginning and I played the 1 at the very last one before we change chords. Let's try that again, okay? We're soloing all over the bars. We're just not emphasizing those roots. You can hit it in passing, but you're just kind of like, not emphasizing it. Here we go. So there I came in a little bit earlier, like on that third bar, and I put the 1 in, but you can hear by staying away from the note, I created a phrase that went over the 4 bars, okay? So just not hitting the chord tone or emphasizing the chord tone you're on helps with kind of arching and playing over these bars. So let me do a whole 12-bar blues really quickly with an example of really trying to stay away from the roots when I'm on 1 on the 1, the 4 on the 4, and the 5 on the 5. Now this is a very conscious thing, so if I don't sound too good, it's because I'm trying to teach and record at the same time, and that's my excuse. Here we go. So there were longer phrases in between those root notes. I hope this is making sense. Again, I can't stress this enough. This is about if you know how the blues works, which is all my channel playlists below. Very, very simple stuff. This is the spaces between. All right, last one. The last one really asks a lot of us if we're playing to a backing track. Backing tracks are usually very steady with their tempo and their volume, but playing with dynamics, your louds and softs, really helps prevent that natural momentum that we have in whatever scale we're practicing. It really stops it. Really stops it. You know, if you find yourself going like when you start to think about the dynamics, like playing it quietly by squeezing less at the pick, all of a sudden that riff kind of falls apart because you're not playing it with the same tenacity. And so you want to try to feel like that human element of the blues coming through with all these tips, but here just trying dynamics, all right? Louds and softs. It's hard to do it with a backing track because they're usually back tracks is going, but you owe it to yourself to pretend the backing track got quiet or the backing track got really loud. And so again, to play quietly, you just squeeze your pick less. To play loudly, you really push on that pick or squeeze it. It brings the volume out, and you want to think about loud and soft. And that really, honestly, I find that that breaks the pattern of repetition. So let's see what we got. When you're thinking about your picking hand, the attention goes there and the left hand goes, help me, help me. And you're like, no, I'm paying attention to my picking hand. And it kind of really starts to kind of look at that scale step by step instead of seeing your normal, you know, wear and tear that you do with it. Oh gosh, I hope this helps someone. This is really David's video lesson recap. So David, I hope you enjoyed it. This is it. If you enjoyed it, tell David you enjoyed his questions. Let David know also that he's actually playing very, very, very well, and I can't wait to see him again, have him come down to the studio. And that's pretty much it. If you want to practice this stuff, we'll be practicing on Patreon, you know, pretty much playing the human element of everything in the blues, and that's all I have to say. So David, go get it. Everyone else, hope you enjoyed the recap. Take care. Bye-bye.